Is it recording video? Fantastic. Well, good afternoon, my fellow colleagues, all three of you. My name is Rachel Pally, and I'm a marketing and Spanish double major here at the University of Mount Union. And there's a brief story of kind of how I selected my topic, particularly for this class and for this, this paper and this assignment. It's kind of one of those things where I was sitting at my desk less than optimal amount of time before this assignment was due, frantically thinking of something to come up with that would be as culminating to create a 15-page research paper, 15 to 20-page research paper. And I was kind of going through like some medicines that I had on my desk. I'm like, gotta get rid of this migraine. And I kind of read the back of the label on the prescription medication that I had to take. And you know, you see everything from like, oh, it might cause an increase in your heart palpitations, or you know, you might grow a third upper appendage. And everything like that. So I ultimately came up with the insane idea for a topic of who might count as human in terms of human research and medical development. So ultimately the topic I took in more of an interdisciplinary way and performed a cost analysis as a potential ways of conducting ethical clinical trials and continuing that for the benefit of society. But because of post-current legislation, currently, post-1991, that's the last time there's been legislation, there's still been unethical treatment of humans during the experimentation process. But for the majority of you all, you probably don't know too much about the legislative history or the history of medicinal testing in the United States, so I'm going to do a brief overview of that. There was a test called the Tuskegee syphilis test between 1937 and 1972, which included 600 Black African American males. They were injected with the syphilis virus and then monitored for 40 years. So that's kind of something that's a little rusty in our past. There was also Project MKUltra during the 1950s, whenever the CIA was trying to gain mind control over people, and during the Cold War era. So that exists in our history as well. But according to the National Institute of Health, and their timeline of law related to the protection of human subjects, the earliest legislation for the United States in terms of human experimentation is the 1938 Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. This act came as a result because there were 107 members of society who had passed away from a previously falsely marketed prescription drug that was later found to have the same components of that of antifreeze. So this law establishes that every single medicinal drug that is approved by the FDA needs to be marketed and made sure that it is safe. So therefore it requires the absolute necessity of human experimentation in the final stages of clinical trials. According to the New England Journal of Medicine, the next legislation to affect the United States was the Nuremberg Code, following the trial of the Nazi doctors in 1964, because of their cruel and unusual punishment towards that of prisoners. So that affected the United States as well. But the most current federal policy is the Federal Policy of Protection of Human Subjects, which is known as the Common Rule, and it was published in 1991. Following 1991, there have still been many unethical cases of human experimentation, which I elaborate more on in my paper, but for the sake of time today, I'll just mention one. There's one fellow named Jesse Gelsinger, who was freshly 18 years old, studied and observed by the University of Pennsylvania. He had a liver condition that caused him to not properly process proteins like the body does, and through their first phases of clinical trials, every other human subject in the study was given 100 times less than the previous animals treated of a specific injection, whereas Jesse was only given 17 times less, which is about an 83% difference of the medication. And it was a real unethical situation based off of uninformed consent, because he had no idea that the previous animals in the past study had all not survived. So it was basically a skewed results type thing. So that's just one of the many instances post-1991 that has happened in the United States. But I thought to myself when going through all of this, because now the problem is, do humans participate in trials? They do. They have to. It's part of our government legislation and for the safety of everyone. But I kind of thought to myself, how do regular citizens get started into this whole thing? Because some people make a living out of it. According to clinicaltrials.gov, you have to sign up through clinicaltrials.gov in order to be a subject as one of these tests. And not a lot of people are familiar with this site or the facts that you can actually contribute to the science community by signing up. The majority of those that do sign up are white males, which in turn can skew data for any woman. Like some birth control has been tested on men probably not the best idea for women. So this leads to another problem with unethical experimentation, is that there are often swayed results and biased results in order to get things right because of the lack of sample size. So in my research, you kind of go on Google a little bit and be like, okay, what does the internet, what do scholars suggest? The two main solutions to this problem of not having enough participants or not having enough, like, the ethical problem of who is going to undergo these types of tests for the benefit of society, there are two main solutions, if you will, in quotations, that came up. One was to use prisoners of war, which I found by a specific scholar. He's like, well, that's kind of what World War II was about, so we can't do that, so we processed the Nuremberg Code in 1964. And the secondary option that was posed most frequently was to use prisoners within the United States. As a class, we observed the school-to-prison pipeline and how much the prison industry has become prevalent, and we know that there's a vast sample population within that that could possibly be there. So what I did, being a business major, I'm like, both of these are rather unethical, so which one is cheaper? So I did a cost analysis of advertising for clinicaltrials.gov by sending out like flyers, emails, whatever, and that just became too complex and not necessarily on the ethical side of this discipline, so I wanted to target it back to what the question is of who counts as human in this situation. So I got rid of that idea. Then therefore I did like a cost analysis of versus prisoners, versus using innocent citizens, and of course using prisoners might be the cheaper option, but that still kind of encompasses my problem with where are the ethics in this and where's the ethical answer rather than a business answer. So I kind of thought like the old El Paso, Texas commercial, like the little girl who just goes, why not both? So what I ended up coming up with was the most ethical solution would be to, despite legislation faults, perhaps open up the sample population to that of the prison population, if you'll look at your lovely little Excel documents right there. The very, very first one, it states from the U.S. National Library of Medicine, the population through clinicaltrials.gov that is in the year of 2016 has been tested on strictly for drug and biological trials. That number is 44,346. And then to the right of that, underneath operating costs, you have the Centerpoint Clinical Services site for their phase 2 and phase 3 typical average cost for one national institution for conducting those phases. Below in the second appendix, you have the numbers from the Bureau of Justice Statistics about federal prison population in the year 2016, which is about 1.5 million. The annual operating cost to kind of host essentially one inmate in federal prison, which is $31,977. So that makes your approximate yearly operating cost for those amount of prisoners to be $48.8 billion. Now on the bottom, back to the why not both situation. If you sum up those total populations, you get approximately 1.5 billion people that you could possibly choose from, and at anywhere between a range of $4.83 billion and $4.87 billion that are accumulated whenever these are operated each year, both through clinical trials and the establishment of the prison population. So what I kind of elaborated more on in my paper is, I don't know what all you could do with that money, but I'm sure with $4.8 billion is enough for some type of reformation. It is possible to combine both the financial capitals and industries within, and perhaps create something along the lines of like a prison healthcare complex system. It would keep members of society separate from those in the prison industrial complex, but it could be like a building added on to, it could be a part of their current healthcare services, which are already somewhat lacking in the prison industry. And it would give prisoners that have, for the sake of society and in our eyes, which we kind of like have this negative connotation towards them, it would give them a second chance to give a positive contribution to society. They would be fully consent-based and volunteer-based. It could contribute to the benefit of their health. If they have like a heart problem, if they're testing a new health medicine, they could have the opportunity to benefit their longevity, whether it be behind bars or not. It would be strictly on a volunteer basis, and they would be able to reap some of the benefits that members who sign up for clinical trials do, such as the health benefits and any monetary benefits as well. So, in conclusion, I'm really don't know what the government does with $48.8 billion other than keep people in institutions, but I think it would be an interesting way of looking at it as an ethical-based problem solution basis to incorporate clinical trials availability for inmates.